The champagne flute slipped from Sarah's trembling fingers, crystal shattering against the marble floor of the upscale coffee shop. The wedding announcement stared back at her from the newspaper's society page. There I was, radiant in ivory, silk, and French lace, my arm linked with Marcus Blackwood, the man she'd been obsessing over since we were 16 years old. The headline read, Local heiress Emma Chen Blackwood marries prominent civil rights attorney after miraculous recovery from near-fatal accident. I watched her face crumble from my corner table across the room, savoring every micro-expression of devastation as it played across her once perfect features. She had no idea I was there, no idea that her supposedly brain-damaged best friend remembered everything with crystal clarity, especially the exact moment she placed her manicured hands on my chest and shoved me off Widow's Peak 3.5 years ago. The irony was absolutely delicious. Sarah Wellington thought she'd eliminated her competition for Marcus's affections forever. Instead, she'd handed me the perfect cover story for the most elaborate revenge plot in Manhattan's social history. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, from the moment I realized that my best friend since childhood was actually my greatest enemy. 3.5 years earlier, I'd been Emma Chen, the scholarship kid who somehow ended up orbiting around Sarah Wellington's glittering social sphere like a dim star circling the sun. My parents, David and Lynn Chen, ran Chen's Market, a small but beloved grocery store in Chinatown where they worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week, just to keep me enrolled at Briarwood Academy, the most exclusive private school on the Upper East Side. I should have seen the warning signs much earlier than I did. The way Sarah's smile never quite reached her pale blue eyes when boys paid attention to me at parties. How she'd accidentally spill red wine on my carefully thrifted dresses right before important social events. The subtle ways she undermined my confidence with backhanded compliments disguised as friendly concern, always delivered with that perfectly practiced sorority girl giggle. You're so lucky to have such natural, effortless beauty, Em, she'd coo while touching up her own professionally applied makeup. I mean, you could never afford the treatments and procedures the rest of us get, but you totally don't need them anyway. Your exotic look is so unique. The word exotic always made my skin crawl, but I was too naive, too grateful for her friendship to call her out on the casual racism wrapped in false compliments. I thought Sarah genuinely cared about me, that beneath her privileged exterior was someone who valued our friendship, despite our different backgrounds. Looking back now, I can see how carefully she orchestrated my social isolation. How she'd schedule study sessions with our other friends without inviting me, then apologize profusely later, claiming she'd totally forgotten to include me. How she'd share embarrassing stories about my family's financial struggles with our classmates, always framed as touching examples of my inspiring resilience, but calculated to remind everyone of my lower status. The hiking trip to Widow's Peak should have been my final warning. Sarah had suggested it out of nowhere during our senior year, claiming she wanted some quality girl time before college applications consumed our lives. Just the two of us, like old times, she said with that synthetic sweetness that I'd somehow learned to interpret as genuine affection. We never get to hang out alone anymore, she'd insisted when I expressed hesitation about the 3-hour drive to the remote hiking trail. Everyone's always around, and I miss just being Emma and Sarah, you know? Best friends since forever. I'd felt touched by her sentimentality, never imagining that she was already planning my death. We'd driven up in her Range Rover on a crisp October Saturday, the autumn foliage creating a stunning backdrop that should have been romantic but felt somehow ominous. Sarah had been unusually quiet during the drive, her knuckles white as she gripped the steering wheel. When I'd asked if everything was okay, she'd flashed me that brilliant, empty smile. Just thinking about the future, she'd said, about how much everything's going to change. The hike itself had been pleasant enough. Widow's Peak was notorious for its challenging trail and spectacular views, rising nearly 2,000 feet above the Hudson Valley. Sarah had been in good spirits as we climbed, chatting about college plans and sharing gossip about our classmates. I'd started to relax, thinking maybe I'd been imagining the tension between us lately. We'd reached the summit just as the sun was beginning to set, painting the entire valley in shades of gold and crimson. The view was absolutely breathtaking. The entire tri state area sprawled below us like a glittering carpet of lights just beginning to twinkle on in the gathering dusk. I was taking a selfie, trying to capture the magical quality of the light, when Sarah started talking about Marcus. "I've been in love with him since we were sophomores," she said, her voice taking on a strange, hollow quality that made me glance up from my phone. "Did you know that, Emma?" "Of course I knew," I replied, still focused on getting the perfect shot with the sunset behind me. "Everyone at school knows you've had a crush on Marcus forever. You two are totally meant to be together." "Everyone knows except Marcus himself, apparently." Something in her tone, cold, bitter, dangerous, made me slowly lower my phone and really look at her for the first time that evening. She was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, her usually warm blue eyes now as cold and sharp as winter ice. There was something predatory in her gaze, something that made every instinct I had start screaming danger. "He asked about you again yesterday," she continued in that same eerily calm voice. "Wanted to know if you were planning to go to Jenny Morrison's Halloween party next weekend." It's always about you, isn't it, Emma? Poor little Emma with her tragic backstory and her big dreams and her inspiring determination to rise above her circumstances. So noble, so worthy of rescue by a knight in shining armor. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" I asked, taking an unconscious step backward. "Marcus is your friend. He's everyone's friend. He's just being nice." "Nice?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "He's never looked at me the way he looks at you, Emma. Never asked my friends about me, never found excuses to sit near me in class, never offered to help me with my homework, even though we both know I'm perfectly capable of handling advanced placement literature on my own." The pieces started clicking into place with horrible clarity. Marcus Blackwood, senior class president, captain of the debate team, and the closest thing Briarwood Academy had to royalty. Tall, dark-haired, impossibly handsome in that old money way that made girls swoon and boys feel inadequate. I'd noticed him noticing me, of course, the lingering glances across the cafeteria, the way he always seemed to end up in my vicinity at parties, the carefully casual questions about my college plans. But I'd never acted on it because I knew how Sarah felt about him. Girl code, loyalty, friendship, all those things that apparently meant nothing to her, but everything to me. "Sarah, I swear I've never encouraged him," I said, my heart starting to pound as I realized how far we were from civilization, how isolated this clifftop was, how easy it would be for someone to have an accident up here. "I would never, ever do that to you. You're my best friend." "Your best friend?" She repeated the words like they tasted bitter. "Do you know what it's like, Emma? Being the supporting character in your own life? Watching everyone fall over themselves to help poor, disadvantaged Emma while treating me like some shallow, rich girl whose only value is her father's credit card. That's not true, isn't it?" She was advancing on me now, and I was backing toward the edge of the cliff, my feet sliding on the loose gravel. "You get the academic scholarships, the sympathy, the special treatment from teachers who want to nurture your potential. You get Marcus's attention just by existing, while I've spent 2 years trying everything I can think of to make him see me as more than just Sarah Wellington, the trust fund princess. Sarah, please, you're scaring me." "I'm scaring you?" Her voice rose to a near shriek. "I've spent my entire life being scared, Emma. Scared that I'll never be smart enough, never be interesting enough, never be worthy enough to compete with girls like you who have actual personalities instead of just daddy's money." I tried to reason with her, tried to make her understand that Marcus wasn't worth destroying our friendship over, that there would be other boys in college, that we were both going to have amazing futures. But she wasn't listening anymore. The mask of civilized behavior had finally slipped completely, revealing the raw jealousy and resentment that had been festering underneath for years. "You know what the worst part is?" she continued, her voice dropping back to that eerily calm tone. "You don't even want him. You're so focused on your noble goals of lifting your family out of poverty and proving that scholarship kids deserve respect that you haven't even noticed that the most eligible boy in our entire school is practically throwing himself at your feet." "Sarah, he's going to ask you to homecoming," she said with absolute certainty. "Jenny Morrison told me he already bought tickets. He's going to ask you, and you're going to say yes because you're finally going to let yourself have something good. And I'm going to have to stand there and smile and pretend to be happy for you while my heart gets ripped apart. That's when I understood that this wasn't just about Marcus. This was about years of accumulated resentment, about the fundamental unfairness Sarah perceived in a world where the poor scholarship girl could inspire the kind of genuine affection that all her money couldn't buy. Sarah, please, I tried one more time. We can work this out. We can talk about it. I'll stay away from Marcus if it means that much to you. No, she said, and there was something final in her voice, something that made my blood turn to ice. It's too late for that. You've already won, Emma. You just don't know it yet. Her hand slammed into my chest with surprising force, fueled by years of yoga and Pilates and personal training sessions. I had maybe half a second to register what was happening before I was falling backward through empty air, my scream echoing off the rocky cliff face as I plummeted toward the jagged rocks below. The last thing I heard before everything went black was Sarah's voice calling out in fake panic. "Oh my God! Emma! Somebody help! She slipped! Help! My friend fell off the cliff!" I should have died. By every law of physics, every medical principle, every reasonable expectation, that fall should have killed me instantly. 160-foot drop onto granite boulders doesn't leave room for miraculous survivals or Hollywood endings. But I wasn't exactly normal, as I would learn during the long, painful months of recovery that followed. I woke up 6 months later in a private medical facility in Geneva, Switzerland, the kind of place that didn't officially exist, where the world's wealthiest families sent their members for treatment of conditions that required absolute discretion. My body was a roadmap of healing fractures and surgical scars, but I was alive. And more importantly, I was whole. My grandmother was sitting beside my bed when I opened my eyes, her weathered hands folded over a silk dress that probably cost more than my family's annual income. Nai looked exactly as I remembered her from childhood visits. Tiny, elegant, with sharp black eyes that seemed to see everything. "Ah, you're awake," she said in Mandarin, her voice warm with relief. "We weren't sure you would remember how to speak when you woke up. Head injuries can be so unpredictable." "Where am I asked, my voice hoarse from months of disuse. "What happened to me? Where are my parents?" Nai smiled, but there was something complex in her expression. Sadness, pride, and something else I couldn't identify. "Your parents are safe, little one. They think you're in a coma in a hospital in Albany. As for where you are," she gestured around the luxurious medical suite with its panoramic view of Lake Geneva. "You're receiving the kind of care your family can afford now that we know what you are." "What I am?" I struggled to sit up, my body protesting every movement. "I don't understand." That's when Nai told me about our family's greatest secret, the truth my parents had spent my entire life trying to hide. Our bloodline wasn't entirely human. Centuries ago, during the Ming Dynasty, my ancestors had been mountain guides in the remote regions of western China. They'd made a pact with the spirits that dwelt in the high places, ancient beings of earth and stone and wind that had watched over the mountains since the world was young. In exchange for protection and stewardship of the sacred peaks, the spirits had gifted our family line with enhanced resilience, longevity, and an uncanny ability to survive what should have been fatal accidents. "We heal faster than normal humans," Nai explained, watching my face carefully for signs of disbelief or fear. "We live longer. We're stronger, more durable. The spirit's gift flows strongest in the women of our line, and it manifests most powerfully in times of great danger." "That's impossible," I whispered. But even as I said it, I was thinking about the fall, about how I'd survived what should have been certain death. "Is it?" She gestured to my healing body. "The doctor said you should have died instantly. Every bone in your body was shattered. Your internal organs were damaged beyond repair. Your skull was fractured in 12 places. And yet here you are, 6 months later, almost completely healed. More importantly," she continued, "our family was far wealthier than I'd ever imagined. The humble grocery store in Chinatown was just the tiniest visible tip of an enormous financial iceberg. My grandmother's generation had parlayed their supernatural resilience and longevity into building a vast international trading empire, with interests in shipping, real estate, technology, and finance spanning across 6 continents. Your parents chose to live modestly," Nai explained. "They wanted you to grow up with humility, with an understanding of what it meant to work hard for everything you achieved. They hoped you could live a normal human life, never needing to know about your true heritage. She paused, her ancient eyes studying my face. But your near-death experience has awakened the spirit's gift fully within you. There's no hiding what you are anymore, little one. The question is, what do you want to do with this knowledge? The amnesia story was Nai's idea, born from centuries of wisdom about the value of patience and strategic thinking. Let them think you remember nothing, she advised, her voice taking on the tone she'd used when teaching me chess as a child. Let your would-be killer believe she succeeded in destroying your mind, along with your body. It will give you the ultimate advantage. They'll underestimate you completely. For the next 6 months, I underwent intensive physical therapy and training in my new reality. I learned to control my enhanced strength and speed, to heal my injuries through focused meditation, to access the ancient knowledge that flowed through my bloodline. Most importantly, I learned about my family's business empire and my place within it. You are the heir, Nai told me on the day I was finally ready to return to New York. Your parents raised you with the character and values we needed, and your trial by fire has awakened your true power. It's time to claim what has always been yours. When I finally returned to the city 8 months after my accident, I played the part of the miraculous survivor perfectly. Emma Chen, the girl who'd somehow lived through an impossible fall, but lost all her memories in the process. The media ate up the story. Tragic accident, months in a coma, brave recovery, touching amnesia that had wiped away the trauma but also erased her past. Sarah visited me constantly during those first few weeks, her guilt making her almost desperate to care for me. She'd bring flowers and magazines, sit beside my hospital bed reading aloud from romance novels, chattering nervously about our shared history. Every interaction was a carefully choreographed performance, designed to convince me and any observers that she was the devoted best friend, heartbroken by my condition but determined to help me rebuild my life. She told me stories about our friendship, carefully edited versions of events that painted her as the loyal, caring companion, and me as the grateful recipient of her generosity. She showed me photo albums from our school years, narrating each picture with calculated sentiment. This was from junior prom, she'd say, pointing to a picture of us in our dresses. You were so nervous about dancing, but I taught you how to waltz in my bedroom the night before. You said I was the best friend anyone could ask for. The irony was breathtaking. Sarah was essentially writing me a script from my own past, never realizing that I remembered every detail with perfect clarity, including the part where she'd spent that entire prom night sulking because Marcus had asked Amy Hartwell to dance instead of her. She showed me photos of Marcus too, claiming they were just friends, but obviously hoping to plant seeds that might grow into something more when I was ready to start dating again. Marcus came to visit you in the hospital every day for the first month, she lied smoothly. He was so worried about you. I think he might be interested in me, but he's been too focused on your recovery to think about romance. I let her believe she was in control, that her careful manipulation was working, while I quietly rebuilt my life according to my family's true status. I used our connections to get early admission to Columbia Law School, ostensibly as a survivor scholarship recipient, but actually because my family had donated the money for an entire new wing on the law building. I studied corporate law and international finance, subjects that would be crucial for my eventual role in the family business. More importantly, I studied Sarah and Marcus from my new perspective, learning everything about their relationship, or rather, the complete lack thereof. Marcus, I discovered, had never seen Sarah as anything more than a casual acquaintance. He was polite but distant with her, clearly uncomfortable with her obvious infatuation, but too well-bred to be directly rude about it. He'd visited me in the hospital. Sarah hadn't lied about that, but it was out of genuine concern for a fellow student, not romantic interest. When I accidentally bumped into him at a charity gala 18 months after my return, an event my family had essentially sponsored, though I pretended to be there as someone's guest, the chemistry was immediate and undeniable. I'm so sorry, he said, steadying me as I pretended to stumble in my designer heels. The dress I was wearing cost more than Sarah's monthly clothing budget, though she didn't know that yet. Are you all right? I think so, I replied, giving him my most vulnerable smile. I'm still getting used to walking in fancy shoes. I'm Emma Chen. I think we went to school together. His eyes lit up with recognition and something else, definite interest. Emma. Of course Sarah's mentioned you. You're the one who... He gestured vaguely, clearly uncomfortable bringing up my accident. The one who took a dramatic tumble off a cliff? Yes, that's me. I laughed, surprised by my own humor about my supposed trauma. Not my most graceful moment, but at least it makes for an interesting conversation starter at parties. He laughed too, clearly charmed by my ability to joke about what everyone assumed was the worst experience of my life. You're remarkably positive about it. I have to admit, I was worried about how you were handling everything when I heard about the memory loss. Well, I can't exactly miss what I don't remember, I said with a shrug. Besides, maybe forgetting the past gives me a chance to build a better future. That conversation led to coffee the next week, which led to dinner a few days later, which led to long walks through Central Park where Marcus would tell me about his work as a civil rights attorney, and I would share carefully crafted stories about my recovery and my family's modest but loving background. I was genuinely falling in love with him, which surprised me. I'd started this as a strategy to hurt Sarah, but Marcus turned out to be everything I'd hoped he might be and more. He was intelligent, compassionate, dedicated to using his privilege to help others. He treated me like an equal despite thinking I came from humble circumstances, and he seemed to genuinely admire what he saw as my resilience and optimism. More importantly, his feelings for me were clearly real and growing stronger every day. This wasn't some rich boy's charity case or exotic fascination. He loved my mind, my humor, my perspective on the world. He loved me for exactly the reasons Sarah had feared he would. Sarah, meanwhile, was slowly losing her grip on reality. She started dropping by my modest apartment unannounced. I'd deliberately chosen a place in a middle-class neighborhood to maintain my cover story. Her eyes wild as she searched for signs that I was regaining my memory. She'd test me constantly with references to our past, watching my face for any flicker of recognition. "Do you remember the time we snuck out of your house to go to that underground concert in Brooklyn?" she'd ask, her voice tight with barely controlled anxiety. No, I'd reply truthfully, because it had never happened. Sarah had made up half the story she told me about our friendship. But it sounds like something I would have enjoyed. You'll have to take me to another one sometime. When Marcus and I started dating officially, 6 months after that first accidental meeting, Sarah's carefully maintained facade began to crack in earnest. She'd call me sobbing at all hours, claiming that Marcus was just taking advantage of my vulnerability, that he'd never truly care about someone like me. "Rich boys like Marcus don't marry scholarship girls, Emma," she insisted during one particularly ugly late-night phone call, her words slurred with what I suspected was alcohol and prescription anxiety medication. "They marry girls like me, girls from their own social class who understand their world." "I thought you said you two were just friends," I replied innocently. We are. I just don't want to see you get hurt when he realizes you can't give him the kind of life he's used to." But I wasn't the one getting hurt. With each passing month, as Marcus and I grew closer, Sarah grew more desperate and erratic. She started drinking heavily at social events, her perfect composure slipping in public in ways that scandalized Manhattan's elite social circles. Her family began to worry about her increasingly unstable behavior, especially after she was arrested for causing a scene outside Marcus's law firm, screaming about how he was making a terrible mistake by dating me. The proposal came exactly 2 years after my return to the city. Marcus had planned it as a symbol of triumph over trauma, wanting to show me that I wasn't defined by my accident. He'd chosen Widow's Peak, the same cliff where Sarah had tried to murder me, having no idea of the location's true significance in my life. "I know this place might have difficult associations for you," he said, as we watched the sunset from the same spot where I'd nearly died. "But I wanted to bring you here to show you that you're not defined by what happened. You're the strongest, most remarkable person I've ever known, Emma. You've rebuilt your entire life from nothing, and watching you do that has made me want to build a life with you." When he dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, I felt a surge of triumph that had everything to do with justice and very little to do with romance. Sarah had tried to eliminate me to clear her path to Marcus. Instead, she'd created the perfect circumstances for me to claim him permanently. Yes, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Tears that were real, even if the reasons behind them weren't what Marcus thought. Yes, of course I'll marry you. The engagement announcement in the society pages was my first public hint that Emma Chen wasn't quite who everyone thought she was. The accompanying article mentioned that I was a successful businesswoman and investment advisor, carefully worded references to my actual role in my family's empire. Sarah would have read those words and felt the first stirrings of unease, wondering how a girl who'd grown up above a grocery store had suddenly developed a portfolio worth commenting on. The wedding planning was 6 months of exquisite psychological torture for Sarah. As my supposed best friend and maid of honor, she had to smile and nod while I showed her venue options that cost more than most people's houses, dress fittings for custom Vera Wang gowns, and catering menus from Michelin-starred restaurants. I caught her crying in the bathroom during my bridal shower at the Plaza Hotel, her carefully applied makeup running in black streams down her cheeks as she stared at her reflection with hollow eyes. "Are you okay?" I asked, playing concerned while secretly savoring her distress. I just, I never thought I'd see you this happy again," she sobbed. "After the accident, I was so afraid you'd never have a normal life, never find love, never get to have all the things every girl dreams about. You saved my life that day," I said, squeezing her hands and watching her flinch at the reminder. "If you hadn't been there to call for help so quickly, I would have died on that cliff. I owe everything I have now to you, Sarah. I literally wouldn't be here without you." The guilt in her eyes was beautiful to behold, but there was something else there too, a growing confusion and suspicion that she couldn't quite articulate yet. The wedding itself was the social event of the season, covered by Town and Country Vogue and the New York Times Society page. Sarah stood beside me in a pale pink Marquesa dress that I'd specifically chosen because it washed out her complexion, while I glowed in ivory silk that had been designed to complement my coloring perfectly. Marcus's family, initially skeptical of his choice to marry someone from such supposedly humble circumstances, had been completely won over by my charm, intelligence, and the subtle displays of wealth that my family had started allowing me to show. The fact that my grandmother had quietly arranged for some of the most powerful people in international business to attend our wedding as family friends hadn't hurt either. During my reception speech, I made sure to thank Sarah publicly for being such a devoted friend during my recovery. "Sarah has been my rock through the darkest period of my life," I said, raising my champagne glass toward her as photographers captured the moment. "She visited me every day in the hospital, helped me piece together my past, and never gave up on our friendship even when I couldn't remember our shared history. I literally wouldn't be standing here today without her love and support." The irony was lost on everyone except Sarah, whose face had gone white as she realized the double meaning of my words. She was beginning to understand that something was very, very wrong with the narrative she thought she'd been controlling. But the real revelation came during our honeymoon, when Marcus and I were featured in a Forbes article about young philanthropists to watch. The piece detailed our plans to establish a foundation for trauma survivors, but it also mentioned my family's business interests in passing, references to international trading partnerships and multi-generational wealth that made it clear the Chen family was far more than grocery store owners. Sarah would have read that article sitting in her family's Park Avenue penthouse, slowly realizing that the scholarship girl she'd tried to murder had somehow married the man of her dreams while also apparently belonging to a social stratum that rivaled her own family's status. But even that was nothing compared to what happened next. 6 months after our wedding, Sarah woke up to find the business section of every major newspaper in the country leading with the same devastating headline: "Wellington Industries acquired in hostile takeover by Asian conglomerate." The Chen family's business empire, my family's business empire, had been quietly buying up Wellington Industries' debt for over a year, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Sarah's family, for all their apparent wealth and social status, had been leveraging themselves into financial ruin for the better part of a decade. Their lifestyle had been maintained through increasingly desperate borrowing against assets that were already mortgaged to the hilt. My grandmother had orchestrated the takeover with surgical precision, using shell companies and international partnerships to mask our family's involvement until it was too late for the Wellingtons to defend themselves. By the time Sarah's father realized what was happening, we owned controlling interests in everything from their real estate portfolio to their yacht club memberships. Sarah called me that morning, her voice shaking with panic and disbelief. "Emma, you have to help me," she sobbed into the phone. "They're taking everything: the house, the company, the foundation, even the building where your parents' store is located. You have to talk to your family, see if they know anything about these Chen Industries people." "Sarah," I interrupted gently, letting confusion color my voice. "I'm so sorry, but I don't understand what you're asking me to do. My family runs a small grocery store. We don't have the kind of connections or resources to help with something like this." "But the newspapers said," the Forbes article mentioned. "The newspapers say a lot of things," I replied with perfect innocence. "I think you might be confused about what you read. Marcus and I are comfortable, but we're hardly the kind of people who could influence major corporate transactions." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head as she tried to piece together how the scholarship girl she'd tried to murder had somehow ended up married to the man she loved while her own world crumbled around her in ways that seemed impossible to be coincidental. Over the following weeks, I watched Sarah's mental state deteriorate as her family's empire collapsed in slow motion. Properties were seized, bank accounts frozen, social invitations rescinded as Manhattan's elite distanced themselves from the scandal. The Wellington name, once synonymous with old money respectability, became associated with financial irresponsibility and social decline. Sarah herself was hit hardest of all. Without her family's wealth to maintain her lifestyle, she was forced to move from the Park Avenue penthouse to a modest studio apartment in Queens. The designer clothes, the spa treatments, the exclusive gym memberships, all gone. She took a job working retail at a boutique in Soho, a humiliation that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. But I wasn't finished with her yet. The final phase of my revenge required patience and careful planning. I began making appearances at the same social events Sarah was desperately trying to maintain access to, always dressed impeccably in clothes that cost more than her monthly salary, always accompanied by Marcus and his influential friends. I would greet her warmly, as befitted our supposed friendship, while making subtle references to our wonderful life together. "You should come visit our new house in the Hamptons sometime," I'd say casually. "Marcus found this amazing architect who's designing something completely custom for us. The entertaining space alone is going to be 12,000 square feet." Or, "I'm so excited about the foundation's new headquarters. We're taking over 3 floors of that beautiful building on Fifth Avenue. You know, the one right across from the Met. Marcus says it's important to have a presence that matches our ambitions." Each casual mention was a calculated knife twist, designed to remind Sarah of everything she'd lost and everything I'd gained. But she still didn't understand the full scope of what had happened to her or why. That revelation came 18 months after the takeover, when Sarah's desperation finally drove her to seek me out for a confession. She showed up at my penthouse apartment on a rainy Thursday evening, completely soaked and shivering in clothes that had seen better days. The doorman had called up to announce her, his voice carefully neutral in the way that suggested he found her appearance concerning. When I opened the door, Sarah looked like a ghost of her former self. She'd lost weight. Her once glossy hair was dull and unwashed, and there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and constant anxiety. "We need to talk," she said without preamble, pushing past me into the apartment. I let her in, curious to see what she'd finally worked up the courage to say. She stood in the middle of my living room, taking in the museum-quality art, the handmade Persian rugs, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Everything about the space screamed wealth on a level that made her family's former lifestyle look middle-class by comparison. "I know you remember," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know you remember what really happened on that cliff." "Sarah, you're scaring me. What are you talking about?" "Stop!" she screamed, her carefully maintained composure finally shattering completely. "Stop pretending to be this innocent victim. I know you remember everything." I stepped back, my hand going to my throat in apparent shock. What Sarah didn't know was that I was wearing a small recording device, a precaution Marcus had suggested after her increasingly erratic behavior at social events. Sarah, are you saying you think I'm lying about my memory loss? Why would I do that? The confession poured out of her then, years of guilt and rage and fear erupting in a toxic flood. She told me everything. How she'd planned the hiking trip specifically to get me alone. How she'd spent weeks fantasizing about pushing me off the cliff. How she'd felt a moment of savage satisfaction when she heard my scream echo through the valley. And the worst part, she sobbed, her mascara creating black tracks down her cheeks, is that you don't even remember. You get to live in blissful ignorance while I've been tortured by what I did every single day for 3.5 years. She told me about the nightmares, the panic attacks, the way she'd started drinking heavily to numb the guilt. She described how watching me rebuild my life had been both a relief and a torment. Relief that I'd survived, torment that I'd thrived while she'd spiraled into misery. You were supposed to be grateful, she said, her voice taking on a hysterical edge. After the accident, you were supposed to be broken, dependent on me. I was going to take care of you, and Marcus was going to see how good and loyal I was, and eventually he'd realize that I was the one he should be with. But instead, you came back stronger than ever. You came back perfect and tragic and inspirational, and he fell in love with you anyway. Even brain damaged, you were still more appealing than I could ever be. I let her finish, let her purge every detail of her confession before I spoke. When she finally fell silent, exhausted by her emotional outburst, I walked to the window and looked out at the glittering lights of Manhattan spread below us. You're right, I said quietly, my voice barely audible over the sound of rain against the glass. I do remember. Sarah's head snapped up, her tear-stained face going pale with shock and dawning horror. I remember the hike. I remember you talking about Marcus, about how you'd loved him for years. I remember the look in your eyes when you realized he was interested in me instead of you. I turned to face her, letting her see the cold calculation that I'd kept hidden for so long. And I remember deciding, as I fell through the air toward those rocks, that if I survived, I would make you pay for every single thing you tried to take from me. The horror on her face was everything I'd dreamed it would be during the long months of planning and preparation. But Emma, she whispered, her voice breaking on my name. We were best friends, since we were children. Doesn't that mean anything to you? No, Sarah, we were never friends. You were a predator who kept me close because it made you feel better about yourself to have someone around who was supposedly beneath you. And I was naive enough to mistake your condescension for affection. I walked closer to her, watching as she instinctively backed away. You were right to see me as a threat, just not for the reasons you thought. You assumed that my only advantages were my looks and Marcus's misguided sympathy. You never bothered to find out who I really was, what my family was really capable of. I gestured around the opulent apartment. Did you really think a grocery store owner's daughter could afford a place like this? Did you think Columbia Law School gives full rides to students with traumatic brain injuries out of the goodness of their hearts? Did you think Marcus's family would welcome a nobody into their social circle just because she had a sad story? Sarah's eyes were darting around the room, taking in details she'd been too distraught to notice when she first arrived. The Monet hanging above the fireplace, the Baccarat crystal collection in the built-in cabinets, the handwritten note from the mayor thanking us for our latest charitable donation, casually displayed on the side table. Your Chen Industries, she breathed, the final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Your family destroyed mine. My family reclaimed what was always ours, I corrected. The Wellingtons built their fortune on the backs of immigrant laborers in the 19th century, including my great-great-grandfather who died building your family's first railroad. Consider recent events a very delayed form of justice. I walked to my desk and pulled out a thick folder, letting it fall open to reveal years of financial records, private investigators' reports, and legal documents. Did you think your family's business failures were just bad luck? Market forces? Poor decision-making? Sarah approached the desk like she was walking toward her own execution, her eyes scanning the documents with growing comprehension and terror. We've been planning this for over a decade, I continued conversationally. My grandmother identified the Wellington Industries as a target when I was still in middle school. Every loan your father took out, Every investment that went bad, every supposedly coincidental business setback, all carefully orchestrated. The papers told the story of a masterfully executed long-term strategy. Shell companies providing loans at attractive rates, then calling them in at strategically devastating moments. Business partners who suddenly withdrew from lucrative deals. Regulatory investigations that appeared out of nowhere. 1,000 small cuts designed to weaken the Wellington empire over time. But why? Sarah whispered. Why target my family specifically? What did we ever do to yours? I pulled out a photograph, yellowed with age, showing a group of Chinese railroad workers standing beside a section of completed track. In the corner, barely visible, was the signature of the surveyor who had signed off on the safety inspection. James Wellington, Sarah's great-great-grandfather. Your ancestor cut corners on safety regulations to save money, I explained. Used substandard materials, ignored engineering concerns, bribed inspectors. When a section of track collapsed 6 months later, it killed 43 workers. 43 men who had families, dreams, futures. One of them was my great-great-grandfather. I placed another document beside the photograph, a copy of the original incident report that had been buried in corporate archives for over a century. James Wellington covered up the real cause of the collapse, blamed it on worker negligence and inferior Chinese craftsmanship. The families of the dead received no compensation, no justice, no acknowledgement that their loved ones had died because of corporate greed. Sarah was crying again, but these were different tears. Not the self-pitying sobs of her earlier breakdown, but the quiet tears of someone who finally understood the magnitude of what they were facing. My family has been patient, I continued. We've built our wealth slowly, carefully, waiting for the right moment to balance the scales. When I told my grandmother what you'd done to me, she decided the time had come to collect on a very old debt. I played back the recording of her confession, watching as Sarah realized the full scope of her legal jeopardy. Attempted murder, even from years ago, was still a serious crime. Combined with her family's financial ruin and her increasingly public mental breakdown, she had no resources left to defend herself. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Nothing," I replied with perfect honesty. "You've already given me everything I could have asked for. You gave me the perfect cover story for my transformation from scholarship girl to heiress. You gave me Marcus by removing yourself from consideration through your own instability. You gave me the moral justification for destroying your family by trying to murder me. And now, you've given me your confession." I picked up my phone and dialed 911, speaking calmly to the dispatcher while Sarah sat frozen in her chair. "I need to report an attempted murder. The perpetrator just confessed to pushing me off a cliff 3.5 years ago." The police arrived within minutes. I'd called ahead to let them know they might be needed. They found Sarah still sitting in my living room, too broken to run, too exhausted to fight. The recording of her confession, combined with the physical evidence from the original crime scene investigation, was more than enough to secure an arrest warrant. As they led her away in handcuffs, Sarah turned back to look at me one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Emma." "I know you are," I replied, "but being sorry doesn't undo what you did. It doesn't bring back the 3.5 years you stole from me. And it doesn't change the fact that you're exactly the kind of person who would push their best friend off a cliff because a boy liked her instead of you." The trial was a media sensation that dominated headlines for months. The wealthy heiress who had tried to kill her best friend out of jealousy, only to lose everything to her intended victim's family. The press painted me as the ultimate underdog hero, the scholarship girl who had survived attempted murder, memory loss, and social obscurity to emerge triumphant, while Sarah became the symbol of privileged evil, the poster child for everything wrong with Manhattan's elite. The prosecution's case was airtight. Sarah's recorded confession, combined with forensic evidence that hadn't been properly analyzed during the original investigation, painted a clear picture of premeditated murder. Her defense attorney tried to argue temporary insanity, but the careful planning evident in her actions, choosing the isolated location, creating the cover story, maintaining her deception for years, undermined any claim of diminished capacity. During the sentencing phase, I took the stand to deliver a victim impact statement that had been carefully crafted to maximize Sarah's punishment. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady and clear. Sarah Wellington didn't just try to kill my body that day on Widow's Peak. She tried to kill my future, my dreams, my right to live and love and build a meaningful life. She stole years from me that I can never get back, forced me to rebuild my identity from nothing, and robbed me of the simple trust that the people closest to me wouldn't try to harm me. I paused, letting my words sink in before continuing. But perhaps worse than the physical assault was the psychological torture that followed. For 3.5 years, she sat beside my hospital bed, attended my therapy sessions, and helped me remember our friendship, all while knowing that she was the reason I was there. She turned my recovery into a performance for her own guilt management, making me complicit in my own deception. The judge was clearly moved by my testimony, as was the jury. Sarah was sentenced to 20 years in prison for attempted murder, with additional time for the psychological abuse that had followed. Her remaining assets were seized to pay for restitution and legal fees, leaving her family's legacy completely destroyed. But even that wasn't the end of my revenge. While Sarah sat in prison, I used my family's connections to ensure that her experience there would be appropriately educational. We made generous donations to prisoner rehabilitation programs, specifically funding classes on financial literacy, job skills, and anger management, all things Sarah would need if she ever hoped to rebuild her life after release. I also established a scholarship program in her name at Briarwood Academy, providing full rides to students from disadvantaged backgrounds who showed exceptional promise. Each year, the Sarah Wellington Memorial Scholarship would remind everyone of how spectacularly she had fallen, while helping kids like my former self achieve the success she had tried to deny me. Marcus was supportive throughout the entire ordeal, though I could see that the revelation about Sarah's true nature had shaken him deeply. He'd genuinely liked her, considered her a friend, and discovering that she was capable of attempted murder challenged his fundamental beliefs about human nature. I keep thinking about all the times we hung out together, he confessed one evening as we sat in our garden, watching the sunset over the Hudson. All the conversations we had, the parties, the casual interactions. How did I never see what she really was? Because she didn't want you to see it, I replied, taking his hand. Predators are skilled at wearing masks, at showing people what they want to see. Sarah spent years perfecting the image of the sweet, harmless, rich girl. Even I didn't see through it until it was too late. I'd told Marcus a carefully edited version of the truth, that I'd regained my memories gradually over the months following Sarah's confession, and that I'd been afraid to reveal them because I wasn't sure anyone would believe me. He'd accepted this explanation, understanding my fear and supporting my decision to wait until I had solid evidence before coming forward. The supernatural aspects of my survival and my family's true nature remained secret. Marcus knew that my family was wealthy and influential, but he attributed their business success to hard work and good investments rather than centuries of spirit-enhanced longevity and strategic planning. Some truths were too complex for even the people we loved most to fully understand. Now, 5 years after Sarah's conviction, I have everything she ever wanted and more. Marcus and I are blissfully happy, our marriage built on genuine love and mutual respect. We have 2 beautiful children, a daughter named Grace and a son named David, who will grow up understanding both their human heritage and their supernatural legacy. My role in the family business has expanded considerably. I oversee our North American operations from a corner office in Manhattan's financial district, making decisions that affect millions of people and billions of dollars. The little girl who once lived above a grocery store now sits on the boards of major corporations, advises government officials on international trade policy, and has her name on buildings from New York to Hong Kong. But perhaps the most satisfying part of my new life is the charitable work I do through our foundation. The Second Chances Foundation provides support for survivors of violent crime, helping them rebuild their lives and find justice when the legal system fails them. We've helped thousands of people over the past few years, giving them the resources and connections they need to overcome trauma and achieve their dreams. I visit Sarah occasionally, always perfectly dressed, always radiating health and happiness. Prison has not been kind to her. She's aged rapidly behind bars. Her blonde hair now streaked with gray, her once perfect skin marked by stress and poor nutrition. But I make sure she knows about every triumph in my life, every milestone and achievement that she tried to steal from me. The foundation is expanding internationally, I told her during my most recent visit, settling into the plastic chair across from her in the prison's visiting room. We're opening offices in London, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo. Marcus thinks I should consider running for political office once the kids are older. Apparently, I have a natural talent for public service. Sarah listened in silence, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes fixed on the scratched metal table between us. She rarely spoke during my visits anymore, but I could see the impact of my words in the tightness around her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged with each new revelation of my success. I named our daughter Grace, I continued conversationally. Grace Wellington Blackwood. I thought you'd appreciate having a baby named after you in a way. She's already walking, can you believe it? And so smart. Marcus says she has my eyes, but his stubborn streak. Only then did Sarah look up, and I saw something break behind her eyes at the realization that I'd given my child her surname as a middle name. A final, permanent reminder of who had won and who had lost. Why do you keep coming here? She asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. Haven't you punished me enough? I come here because I want you to understand the full scope of what you lost when you decided to push me off that cliff, I replied gently. You didn't just try to take my life, Sarah. You tried to take my future. So I think it's only fair that you get to watch me live the future you tried to steal in full, vivid detail. I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Every success I achieve, every moment of happiness I experience, every milestone I reach, all of it is possible because I survived what you did to me. In a very real sense, you gave me everything I have now. You should feel proud. The irony was lost on her, but I savored it anyway. Sarah had pushed me off a cliff thinking she was ending my story. Instead, she had given me the perfect origin story for my transformation from overlooked scholarship kid to untouchable heiress. Every article written about my business success, every speech I gave about overcoming adversity, every interview where I discussed the importance of second chances, all of it traced back to that moment when she decided to try to murder me. She had made me into exactly what she feared I would become, the girl who got everything she wanted while Sarah lost everything she held dear. As I left the prison that day, walking out into the bright autumn sunshine where my driver waited beside a gleaming black Tesla, I reflected on the beautiful symmetry of it all. Sarah had tried to eliminate her competition and ended up creating her own replacement. She had attempted to clear her path to Marcus, and instead had handed him to me on a silver platter. She had sought to destroy my future, and had instead given me the perfect foundation for building an empire. The mountain spirits that my ancestors had made their pact with centuries ago were known for their sense of poetic justice. They ensured that those who tried to harm their descendants would face consequences far greater than their original crimes. Sarah had pushed me off a cliff. In return, she had fallen farther than she ever could have imagined. But the most beautiful part of my revenge wasn't the destruction of her life, or even the construction of my own success. It was the fact that she had done it all to herself. Every choice she made, every moment of jealousy and resentment, every act of cruelty disguised as friendship, all of it had led her inevitably to that prison cell where she now sat, finally understanding the true cost of her actions. I didn't have to orchestrate her downfall, I just had to be patient and let her destroy herself while I built something magnificent from the ashes of what she tried to burn down. They say that living well is the best revenge, but I've learned that the most satisfying revenge is the kind where your enemy hands you everything you need to surpass them, then has to spend the rest of their life watching you enjoy what they gave you. Sarah wanted Marcus, so I married him and gave him the love she never could. Sarah wanted wealth and status, so I claimed my true inheritance and surpassed her family's legacy. Sarah wanted me gone, so I used her attempt on my life to become untouchable. She pushed me off a cliff thinking she was writing my ending. Instead, she was writing my beginning. And what a magnificent beginning it turned out to be. The girl who was supposed to die became the woman who couldn't be stopped. The scholarship student became the heiress. The victim became the victor. Sarah Wellington tried to murder Emma Chen and instead created Emma Chen Blackwood. Wife, mother, business mogul, philanthropist, and living proof that sometimes the universe has a sense of humor about justice. As my car pulled away from the prison, heading back toward the city where my family was waiting for me, I smiled and thought about how my grandmother would react when I told her about this latest visit. She would probably laugh, that dry, knowing laugh that came from decades of watching the spirit's justice play out in the lives of those who crossed our family. Patience, little one, she had always told me when I was young and impatient for results. The mountain spirits move slowly, but they never forget a debt. Those who try to harm us will always face consequences. We just have to wait for the right moment to collect. Sarah Wellington had spent 3.5 years thinking she had gotten away with attempted murder. Now she would spend the next 15 years understanding exactly how wrong she had been. And I would spend the rest of my life building an empire on the foundation she had inadvertently provided, living proof that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything your enemy tried to prevent you from being. The scholarship girl who was supposed to die had instead become the woman who had everything. The victim had become the victor. The underdog had become the top dog. And Sarah Wellington would spend every day for the next decade and a half remembering that she was the one who made it all possible.